What's up today, guys? We're going to talk about a few things here in this video today. Mostly, well, all of it regarding the 800 Suzuki engine. You guys are faithful to the channel. You know I purchased this new to me sled. I still got the mountain sled with the C-Tech 2, but I really like the way these Suzuki engines work. And Crossfire's sitting over here with the new heart into it. We ended up throwing a rectifier and a different ECU in this because it died again on me on the trail after about 50 kilometers of driving. So still not totally sure if that's fixed or not, but it hasn't acted up since, so I think we're good. But I want to talk about this style machine and some of the issues that they have. I also want to talk about some of the big mistakes that Arctic Cat made that probably led to their failure in success in today's modern world. So basically I fixed 4 or 5 of these machines in the last couple weeks. I should have videoed yesterday when I was actually fixing the guy's machine. So it's a Procross 800 XF, same as this, but it's black. And we went out trail riding the other night in minus 20, and it was super snow dusty. I mean, traveling in a group, you could hardly see to drive. You could barely see the guy's tail light in front of you, so on, etc. And the one buddy's sled started acting up, and he said every time he'd let it idle, when he went to take off, it would bog real bad. And he said driving along, every time he'd let off the throttle, it would bog for 5 or 6 seconds as he got back onto it. So I told him that night when we were driving, I said, well, my guess would be it's either a fuel pump getting weak or you got to reed bust it. So he came up yesterday, and we did some digging. So the first thing we did was pretty simple and easy. You pull your side panels off, obviously. You pull your hood off. 2 bolts underneath here, Torx keys. Get it that you can access everything. And the very first thing I noticed when we pulled his hood off was his gasket. Had a real bad dimple here in the bottom of it. See, it's not supposed to have that. And basically the lip of it was rolled real bad, so we had a pretty nasty leak. I mean, these gaskets in this setup really doesn't seal that well. And again, here's one of the big issues with these cats. They rely on these frog skins. A lot of guys like me don't put the machine in every night, so if you get any sort of ice buildup and stuff on these frog skins, and then you come out the next day and think you're going to chip it away, if you rip or tear them, this is essentially your air filter, right? So, but with these newer XFs, they're better than the Crossfires because at least your windshield is sort of blocking a lot of this snow dust. You can see my one skin's a little damaged here, but I'm not quite going to condemn it yet. But basically, that's the last thing you want getting into your air system is ice and snow particles. So immediately after seeing this gasket with the rolled edge and knowing the conditions that we were driving in the other night with tons and tons of snow dust floating through the air, I then said, well, it's most likely going to be a reed pedal. So instead of doing the fuel test right off the bat, we already had the hood off. I got him to hold his throttle wide open, and if you take a flashlight, and this is a good thing to do if you're going to buy one of these sleds and you're not too sure about how the other guy treated it and stuff, for the few minutes it takes, 2 Torx bolts in these side panels, the hood connector, pull this off. You can take a flashlight, get somebody to hold the throttle wide open, and you can actually look in and you can see basically all the pedals on the on this side of the sled, which would be the brake and exhaust side. For the other side, you can't really see. The airbox is on too much of an angle. So for the other side, I used one of these digital inspection cameras. Flip the So it's just one of those little rigs with a screen onto it and a snake. And you shove that in there. It's a little bit hard sometimes to get it to line up, but you can have a look at all this stuff before you tear the machine completely apart. Save yourself some time, and you sort of know what you're getting into before you get into it. So luckily, when I looked in on his exhaust side, I noticed right away that he had a busted pedal. Here it is, right here. So this is no good. And most likely that piece of debris went in through, got pulled into the engine, and must have blew out the exhaust because there didn't seem to be any big damage inside the engine. It was a little bit scuffed up, nothing out of the ordinary. But you can see these pedals got a lot of wear onto them. And basically what happens is you get driving. If all your air system isn't completely sealed, you get pulling in these little tiny ice particles. And those little tiny ice particles at the high, I guess you wouldn't call it RPMs, but at the high flap rate or vibration rate that these are opening and closing, when you get little pieces of chips of ice in between them, it's catastrophic. It might as well be rocks. So anyhow, we did the job. Basically on these newer sleds, we didn't pull the airbox out, we just unbolted it off the throttle bodies. And we were able to pull the throttle bodies ahead far enough without actually taking the throttle bodies and the fuel system all apart. And we were able to slip that busted reed out and replace it with another one that was in better shape and good. So immediately after we fixed it, we took it outside, and he took it for a run up across the field and back to the tower. It's probably a kilometer and a half drive. And he came back, he was all smiles. He said, man, it's working awesome. So it did not shut the sled down. The sled did remain sort of in a drivable state. If you're a heavy on the throttle kind of person, you would still get away with driving with one of these busted pedals. But if you're idling, or every time you let off you're getting a bad bog before it opens up and takes its juice, pull your hood off, inspect that gasket, and inspect your reeds, and chances are you're probably going to find an issue. They talk about it all the times on the forums on Facebook and stuff. So while I'm in the topic here, another big issue with these sleds, and it was a big issue with the Crossfires, and Arctic Cat waited a long time to do anything about it. I mean, honestly, the Crossfire is probably one of my favorite, easiest to work on, high-powered sled that they made, that the chassis is sort of, user-friendly and easy to work on. And as you know, I've upgraded the skid suspension in this machine to Walker Evans from a Polaris, and used the Polaris cross shaft. And basically this front shock was the issue in this style Arctic Cat, the Crossfire, and in this style sled, the XFs. So what they did was they put a little super tiny, super thin, I mean not even enough of a bushing to really call it a bushing, on the lower end of the front skid shock. And basically what happens is it pounds the bushing out, and then it pounds the eye of your shock all to pieces, and then it beats the shaft all to hell. And then when you go to replace that stuff, it costs you just about an arm and a leg if you get it from the dealer. So what I've done with this machine is, as you can see, I've still got the what I call stupid factory setup in there. But what I did with the shock was the aluminum tubing that's used to center that shock. I've got a whole bunch of them shafts beat and pounded to pieces from fixing sleds over the years. And I basically took a piece of that aluminum shaft that centers it, the skinny piece, and I made an aluminum bushing out of that. I was going to make one out of brass, but then I would have had to go to a machine shop. But I took the factory, what was left of it. I think it's actually laying right here. Oh, yeah, right there, look. So there's all they put in that shock for a bushing from factory. And that shock is doing so many movements per drive that it would just be an unfathomable rate. So once that wears out, then it beats the shaft all to hell. It beats the eye out of the shock, and if you're a really unlucky person and it beats right through the eye of the shock before you catch it, it could essentially cost you a track. So, like I say, Arctic Cat had a few issues, and then you get into this newer stuff. Here's another prime example, and I mean, I'm hardcore Arctic Cat. I don't do Bombardier or Polaris. It's Arctic Cat only. I just like the way they perform, the way they ride. Now, obviously, with this setup, they finally listened after, this is... Sorry, the phone ran out of memory there. So as I was saying, they finally listened on the suspension end on these newer machines. They've got a much bigger shock bushing on the front shaft going across on these. And it's made of brass, as you can see, so it should be a little bit more durable. I haven't had an issue with this sled yet, but it's still very, very low miles. But everybody I know that runs one of these M8s, the first thing they complain about is they overheat. So, okay, we have a mountain sled. Yes, it's meant to be driving the mountains. I don't have mountains here in Nova Scotia, but anyway, you don't drop the machine out of a helicopter on top of the mountain and start snowmobile, and you got to ride trails up to the mountain to get to the mountain. You know what I'm saying? So here we got, this is probably a $20,000 machine, new, Canadian. And they couldn't be bothered to put any coolers in the back of the tunnel so that they wouldn't overheat. You got one medium-sized cooler up in the front of the tunnel. And they put no snow flap on most of the mountain sleds. So, I mean, it's just... I shake my head because I actually really like this sled, but it annoys me that most of the time I can't drive it around here because it simply won't keep itself cool. It works amazing. It handles awesome. For a 153 or whatever, I can throw this around the trails no differently than this XF, really, at the end of the day. But can't keep it cooled down. I've got scratchers onto it. I've got a flap onto it that I put on, and I even put an extension on the flap to try to get it down closer to the ground. And unless you have this in the absolute perfect kind of powdery dust that it can really throw it around, if you drive this on any sort of hard surface at all, you get nowhere. And it's also frustrating that when this machine overheats, or, it doesn't really overheat, but when it gets in the temperature zone that it doesn't like it and the light starts flashing at you, which is about 10 degrees shy of overheating. When you pull off, if you're trail riding with it, you pull off the edge of the trail and, you try to ride the edge and kick up the powder and the dust. And you got to do that for like 2-3 miles, and then it barely cools itself down, where I honestly even had the temperature light flash on this sled yet this year. The Crossfire, the few odd times that done it to me, you can just pack the trunk full of snow if you've got the long seat like I got. But with these style sleds with the double coolers, if you get off and you ride the edge of the trail, it takes like 10-15 seconds and all is good again, and it brings it down to a normal temperature. So I mean, Arctic Cat should have probably listened to some of their customers over the years with these issues and dealt with them for the amount of money that these sleds cost to make when they're new and for us consumers to buy. So anyway, a little bit longer video and sort of got off topic a little bit, but I know some of you guys are pretty faithful to this Arctic Cat stuff, so I just want to tell you about my stories and adventures. I did end up throwing the Fox floats back on the front of this, took the Walker Evans off, because I duly noted that these Fox floats are like 21 inch, and these were only 19, so I lost 2 inches of height in the front, which sort of takes away from the wheelie effect a little bit. So I switched it back last night. I'm going to give the Fox floats 2 a try. I've never been a fan of Fox floats because they always leak. Like, literally, they always leak. I've never seen anybody buy one of these machines used with the 3 floats that you put air into, the 1 front skid shock's a spring. If they would have put a lightweight spring shock in these sleds from factory instead of this stupid air setup, I mean, they're great when they work, but when they don't, they cost a lot of money to replace. And if you're a hard rider that you really romp the thing, and I just threw these on last night, but if you're going to run floats, you definitely need to run the guards on them as well, because as soon as you chip the shafts up from the ice coming off the skis, which this model may not be so bad, but the Crossfires, if you didn't run the guards onto them, you'd have the shocks ruined in a season or 2, and then you're out, you know, whatever you decide to spend. If you go new from the dealer, I think they're around like $400 a stick. So it's nice that they're adjustable, but there's way more and better suspension companies out there that Cat could have got to supply them with suspension that would have been more superior, would have lasted longer. And again, that front shock bushing, I mean, they've done that for, like, I think they started using that shock and cross shaft before my Crossfire. Mine's a 10. I think they started that in like 07 or 08. So you got a lot of years with the same issues that never really got resolved. I mean, the engines, if you keep clean air to them and put good oil into them, I mean, that Suzuki engine is a damn strong engine. But for the few other little flaws, and it's always the same flaws, like I said, that shock has annoyed me on just about every sled that everybody bought. You hardly ever see one of them that are tight when you get them used. And the floats leaking air, I mean, not to brag up Polaris or Bombardier, but you don't see Polaris or Bombardier in these years with the shocks blown and leaking air, because it just wasn't that option. They went with a better setup. So anyway, that's my mouthful to say about Arctic Cat. Hopefully, if somebody teams up with them, or if they do stay in business, that they take some of this stuff a little more seriously and into consideration. I mean, I've actually already considered with this machine, I've got a tunnel that I purchased when I bought this sled. I got a part sled with it. I've already been debating to take the coolers out of the back of that and rivet them and modify them into this and pipe the coolant lines up through the tunnel just to make this a sled that you can actually drive wherever you want, whenever you want. Just like one of these, right? But if you're going to buy one of these, or you're thinking about it, I'd definitely take the 5 minutes to take the hood and side panels off, check that gasket, check your reeds, and a good, like when we took this apart there on Buddy's sled yesterday, as soon as we pulled the hood off and I looked in the air box, there was, you know, frozen ice chips in the bottom of the air box from snow coming in around this gasket. The motor keeps the air box somewhat warm when the sled's running, so the snow melts, becomes water. Then you get a big water droplet laying in the bottom of your air box. The sled sits overnight. You start the machine up cold. You get pounded around over bumps. The chip of ice gets knocked loose. And next thing, bang-o, it's through your engine. Most of the time, it costs you the engine. This is literally one of the first times that I've seen it just take the pedal and, you know, not score a cylinder head or ruin a piston and ring, whatever. Here's my bucket of destruction here. You know, there's a nasty one. Some nasty gouges in her. There's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's a cylinder top with the piss beat out of it. And there's You know, there's another cylinder head that's obliterated. Actually, this one's, I wouldn't quite call that obliterated, but it's not good. I cleaned it up once upon a time just to run it to see how long it would last, but you know, essentially when ice chips go through your engine, that's the type of shit that you see. And yeah, I blew up more than one motor, trust me. I've personally blew up 2 of them, and I've seen 2 other ones blown up. So since 2010 to date, all the people around that run these 800 motors, I've literally seen 4 engines in total that actually blew up. And Steve's 1000 down the road that we had hopped up last year, that shit the biscuit the other day. So, but it only took 1 cylinder, which is a lot cheaper to fix them both. But that being said, I've done a pile of snowmobiling since 2010 with that Crossfire. I believe there's almost 10,000 miles in that one. There's like 9,000 miles in this new one I bought. And like I say, as long as you keep clean air to them and keep good oil into them, they will last a long time. But as soon as that moment happens that it doesn't have clean air and you get out riding in the wrong kind of snow, it could cost you an engine. So I appreciate you guys watching. If you watch the whole thing, stay tuned. There will be more videos to come, and please subscribe.